All right, welcome back in, everybody, to another episode of Stadium Seat Sports here. As always, I am Coop here with my partner and co-host Kriv. And this week, we're going to be taking a look at some of the best upcoming games here in college football. I got a slate of 3 games here that we're going to chat in about. The first one we're going to start about is easily the biggest game of the week, and that's going to be Ohio State traveling to Penn State to take on the Nittany Lions. So, Kriv, I'll let you kind of start off with this one because I think this one's going to be one we're going to focus on the most here this week in a week where there's not a ton of studded games, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this game is going to tell us a lot about the way the season is going to play out for either one of these teams. Penn State, James Franklin, they've been in this situation before, highly ranked, going into a big game against Ohio State or Michigan or whoever it might be, and they just seem to come up short. And even though Beaver Stadium, Happy Valley is one of the hardest places to go into, for whatever reason, those big games have just dropped over and over for James Franklin. But I will say, Ohio State already has one loss. Obviously, they could have easily won that game against Oregon. But at the same time, last week was eye-opening. That Ohio State team was flat. They didn't bounce back at all from that loss. Losing Josh Simmons at left tackle just proved to be a gigantic loss because everything they tried to do without him, that offensive line could not open up any run lanes whatsoever.
Yep.
And Ohio State has Judkins and Henderson, and they couldn't run the ball. And that tells you everything you need to know about that offensive line. And it's not like Nebraska has some world-class defense. They should have been able to average more than that. I think it's like 3 yards a carry, something completely unacceptable by OSU standards. And between that and the run game, I think this is the best chance Penn State and James Franklin have had, to the point where they might honestly, I know OSU's slightly favored, but this is a golden opportunity for them. I think they match up great. That defense is going to tee off against this Ohio State offensive line. If they don't have a game plan ready, they're going to get absolutely burned. I mean, you saw it with a subpar Nebraska run game. They were able to run the ball on OSU's defense last week. I will say, though, OSU's defense kind of caught a few breaks with Dylan Raiola missing some passes, but they were flying around more. They were doing unique looks. I think they heard a lot of that criticism from that Oregon game with that base defense with no creativity. But yeah, this is a very intriguing game, and I think you're going to learn a lot about both teams, both quarterbacks too. I mean, this is Will Howard revenge game for not being recruited by his in-state team, and Drew Aller, of course, Ohio guy, going up against the Buckeyes again. He did not play well at all last year, so there's a lot of storylines here, and there's a lot of big-time college football playoff impact. And if Ohio State's not careful, they're gonna find themselves in a very dangerous position and a huge uphill battle going forward.
Yeah. No, I mean, listen, I think you hit on a lot of great points in kind of previewing both of these teams, talking about, the season that has been for both of these teams already. And, you and I texted back and forth about this. Coming out of that Oregon game for Ohio State, neither one of us felt that Ohio State was not one of the 3 best teams in the country coming out of that game. We were like, listen, Ohio State probably went in there, played like maybe their B game at best, and give Oregon credit. This is not a shot at Oregon. I think Oregon's a very good team. They're sitting there at the number 1 team in the country right now as of this recording. But Ohio State didn't play their best game against Oregon, and you can make an argument Oregon didn't play their best game either, but they went into their house, hostile environment, one of the most hostile in all of college football, and they lost by 1 point on the road to what is now the number 1 team in the country. So I think coming out of that game, we both felt Ohio State and Oregon easily cemented themselves as 2 of the 3 best teams in the country. Then Ohio State gets a bye week, and they come out of the bye week and just look completely flat against really an average at best Nebraska team. I think Dylan Raiola is going to have a really bright future in college. And I think, obviously those corn-fed Nebraska boys are big on both lines, but they gave their defensive line, gave Ohio State's offensive line fits all day this past Saturday. And again, Nebraska's got those big corn-fed boys there. They're no slouches by any means, but they're not Penn State's D-line. Like, Penn State's D-line is one of the, I would say, top 5 D-lines in all of college football. And that Simmons loss for Ohio State is just looming so large. And now they lost the backup to Simmons.
Yeah.
Seemingly. I haven't seen an injury report, but he left on crutches, so it doesn't look good for him. And, hope the young man recovers and is okay in the end, and same to Simmons. But, now they've got to really, work some magic here to try and, pass block and ultimately get a push against one of the best D lines in all of college football. And it's not going to be easy by any means. And the problem is this past week, this game was way closer than it should have been. And again, it's not any disrespect to Matt Rule and Dylan Raiola and that Nebraska program, but like, you saw it, Ohio State became one-dimensional in that game because it has nothing to do with TreVeyon Henderson, Quinshon Judkins. Those two are phenomenal. I don't even think it had to really do with the scheme that Chip Kelly was putting up. It was just the offensive line could not get any push. Ohio State became one-dimensional, and they got into a very uncomfortable situation with a team that they should have handled significantly easier than they did. And for Penn State, you're playing at home. Obviously, the health of Drew Aller is a question mark. Obviously, he went down at the end of the second quarter there against Wisconsin this past week. But his backup came in and really was running that offense quite well. And obviously they've got, Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton in the backfield, a great running back duo combo, right up there with Ohio State's of TreVeyon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. So this is right now, I think both of us would probably say we feel worse about Ohio State, significantly worse potentially than we did after that Oregon loss, even though Ohio State won this past weekend. And I'm trying not to overreact too much because Georgia struggled with an average Kentucky team. There are multiple teams here. Oregon struggled mightily in the first 2 or 3 weeks of the year, and now they look like the best team in the country right now, especially after that Ohio State win. And then, they went and took care of business this past weekend with ease. So these off weeks or off week in Ohio State's case do happen, but it's very concerning that this is happening and that the offensive line is looking this lackadaisical going into the week where this is probably the top defensive line you're going to face all year in the regular season. Oregon's defensive line is also phenomenal, but they were missing one of their best players on defense when they played that game. So this is arguably the best defensive line you're going to see all year in the regular season. So it's very concerning if you're the Ohio State program, if you're an Ohio State fan, to look at this game and be like, I'm very confident going into this game, despite the fact that you've had an incredible amount of success against this team. And James Franklin's 1-12 against top 5 opponents, 1-8 at home against top 5 opponents. That one lone win was against Ohio State, I think in 2016, 2017, one of those 2 years. So, his track record in these games is not great, but, right now I just don't know. I don't know how I feel comfortable going with Ohio State in this game. And maybe that plays into their favor where their back is against the wall a little bit and people will look at that Nebraska game and they say, man, this team is just not right. They're not going to get it done against this Penn State team. I'm taking Penn State. And they feel slighted and they feel doubted and they play a great game. I think that's certainly possible. But for me right now, like, I'd take Penn State in the points in this game right now. I feel more confident about what Penn State brings to the table, or for lack of a better words, what they don't bring to the table than I do about Ohio State right now, because that offensive line, similar to like the quarterback position in the NFL, where it's so important, having a dominating offensive line and defensive line in college football is so important. And Ohio State's not dominant on either offensive or defensive line this year so far. And I don't know if part of that is scheme specifically on the defensive side, but for the offense, if they can't get the run game going, they're in major trouble because as well as Howard played in that Oregon game, he had some really nice throws against Nebraska here. A couple of deep balls that they seem to have practiced, in the bye week. If they become a one-dimensional team, that Penn State defense is too good, and they're going to find themselves in a really cruddy situation. And then almost certainly they're out of the Big Ten title race. So like you said, they find themselves in a really precarious situation because then you've lost you've lost the two teams that are ranked on your schedule so far. And the only other one you'll have, going for you likely is going to be Indiana. And Indiana looks very good right now. So that's not some layup gimme that, is every year for Ohio State against Indiana. So, this is really kind of feels like a must win for the Buckeyes this week. It truly does. And for Ryan Day, if he hopes to continue coaching that program. So it's going to be really interesting. They're going to have to come out with their hair on fire. But right now I feel slightly better about Penn State personally.
Yeah. And I think you hit a lot of good points. I just want to hit on a few other ones real fast, but you mentioned Ohio State essentially being down to their third string left tackle. One, Ohio State has done a terrible job building depth on the offensive line, but also Abdul Carter is arguably a top 5, top 10 NFL pick coming up at defensive end. If Ohio State can't come up with a viable plan to slow him down or take him out of the game, it doesn't matter how talented Ohio State is at running back, quarterback, receiver. If he's blowing up the game, just like a few years ago, you saw JTT blow up this very game for Ohio State. It's a game changer, and it nullifies all the advantages you have. So I'd imagine Ohio State's going to have some things schemed up, probably a lot of quick passes, things like that. But they need to be ready to rock, and if they're not, it's going to get completely out of hand. And then the other, just one little tidbit here, is that Drew Aller is currently a game time decision.
Yeah.
And while he's had his moments this year, he's had some games where he's looked great, games where he's looked like the Drew Aller of old. I don't know if between him and his backup, if it makes that big of an impact. I know Aller's, he's obviously has all the tools and he could definitely make some big throws here and there, but Ohio State's weaknesses they just feel more glaring than they have in years past. And they're seemingly compounding, and that is concerning. So I'm with you. I'm very hard pressed. I don't think I could pick Ohio State in this game, even though I think they're vastly superior. They need to prove to us that those perceived weaknesses are not weaknesses, and they need to show they can rise on the big stage. Yeah. And I know it's crazy to say that because they're playing James Franklin, who has never risen on the big stage, but it just feels like that time might be coming here, and this is a catalyst moment for Ryan Day and potentially James Franklin. I mean, this is it. This is everything for both these coaches. They have a chance to redefine the season and redefine the narratives that they have about themselves, and it's gonna play out on the field on Saturday.
Yeah. And look, before we close out this game, I'll just say this, like when I said, this can be a defining moment for Ryan Day and his potential future with this program, like me personally, and some Ohio State fans may feel differently. Other people, in the national media may feel differently. I don't necessarily critique a lot of Ryan Day's in-game coaching. Like to me, the head coach of a college football program doesn't do all that much in terms of the necessary game plan. Like when I look at a college football head coach, they obviously have some insight and some say in what goes on, but really it's trusting and hiring the right position coaches and letting them get your units to great to elite levels. And I think Ryan Day has swung and missed on several hires on this Ohio State coaching staff. Number one, Fry, the offensive line coach, I think is a complete mishire. I think he's been a complete and utter disaster since he's gotten to Ohio State. I think their offensive line and the talent that they bring in is far too good to have looked as pedestrian as it does. And they've also swung and missed on a lot of really elite offensive line recruits in the past several years. So I think Fry is a complete and utter disaster of a hire. I'm not sold on Jim Knowles as a hire by Ryan Day either. So that is my biggest gripe with Ryan Day as the head coach at Ohio State, is not necessarily his in-game decisions. His recruiting, I think, is phenomenal. I think he has a lot of good energy, but he's swung and missed on a lot of his position coaching hires, and that's plagued the Buckeyes for the last several years. And whether those guys are getting it done or not, that boils down to the head coach that hired them and vouched for them. So that's my biggest complaint. So he's got to look in the mirror, and he called his defensive coaches out. He called Knowles and Larry Johnson out this past week before this Nebraska game, and you did see some different schemes. So he's got to get that under control, and if he does, the talent is at Ohio State. It's very obvious. It's not a question mark. So if they come out and they play the game they're capable of, then they'll walk out of Happy Valley victorious. But if they don't, and those same perceived troubles, like you mentioned, plague them, then they're going to be sitting there at 6-2, 8 games into the year and having lost both of their ranked games so far. So it's going to be a really interesting week for both programs.
Yeah, I think so. And with that being said, I know it's not a star-studded matchup week, but I think there's some other very interesting games out there. And honestly, it's the ACC doing the heavy lifting. And the first game I want to talk about here with you is Louisville at Clemson, and I'll let you take things away.
Yeah. This one's, out of the 3 games we're going to talk about this week, man, 2 of the 3 are in the ACC, and we obviously just touched on the big one in the Big Ten. And so, this Louisville-Clemson game is really interesting to me because obviously Clemson started the year facing Georgia and got just absolutely waxed. And people looked at this Clemson program and Dabo Swinney and said, yep, Dabo can't adjust with the times. He can't be an elite head coach in the NIL, era of college football. Cade Klubnik is not, the recruit or the quarterback we thought he was capable of being. Like, this Clemson team, stands no chance of winning the ACC. They stand no chance of making the postseason, et cetera, et cetera. And, here they are rattling off 6 straight wins. They sit there at 6-1. They're number 11 in the country. And Cade Klubnik has really turned it around. I mean, he's having truly a very, very good year, at quarterback for Clemson. And, even in that game against Georgia, I thought Clemson's defense kind of held their own for the most part. Like, I can't remember exactly what the score was. I think they gave up around 30 points or something along that, those lines. But I thought that their defense was flying around, and I thought that their defense made some really nice plays in that game. It was just that their offense was so anemic that their defense was just consistently on the field, and Georgia was set up in a lot of advantageous positions. Clemson looks like a much more complete football team. They don't just look like one dominant unit. Like, they look like a team that is getting better with each week throughout the year, which is what you want your football team to look like. You don't want to play your best football in September. You want to be playing your best football at the end of November and into December in the bowl season. So that's what they look like. And I think Louisville is going to have their hands full here. And Louisville's having a nice season, man. They're 5-3. Show at quarterback, like, he's having a pretty solid year. He and Klubnik both have 20 touchdowns. Show's got a couple more interceptions than Klubnik at this point in time. But Louisville's kind of they're a hard team to figure out for me, because I think that they could pull off an upset like this over Clemson, but I could also see Clemson, winning by 17 plus. This is a difficult game for me because I don't know what Louisville and what Tyler Show I'm going to get on Saturday night. And so, with that said, I'm going to roll with Clemson because they, like I said, after that, first week embarrassment against Georgia, they've rattled off 6 wins here, and they look like one of the more complete and consistent teams over the last month and a half in college football. And so with that, I'm going to go with Clemson here. I think that they take care of business. I think that they move to 7-1, and I think that they stay Miami's biggest competition in the ACC to win that conference and then go on to the college football playoff. So I'm going to roll with Clemson here.
Yeah, I think Clemson is a great story of how they've kind of turned the narrative around. For all purposes, I mean, people thought Clemson was dead. I mean, they were bad last year. They start off the season, get completely destroyed by Georgia, and you're just like, okay, this program that runs over. Dabo doesn't hit the transfer portal at all. He doesn't play by the new rules, and it just seemed like they were in deep trouble. And they have done a great job bouncing back since week one. They are double-digit favorites going into this game. And I'll say this though, Louisville, they are the team that has almost upset other top playoff teams, potential playoff teams this season, just about more than anyone else. They lost at Notre Dame by 7 points. They lost versus Miami by 7 points, and they could have won either of those games. And their other loss is to SMU, who's number 20 in the country, by 7 points. So they have lost to all their ranked opponents they've played by a difference of 7 points. Literally one touchdown. And at a certain point, the ball is going to start bouncing their way. Something's going to break for them. Someone's going to throw a pick. Someone's going to step up and make a play. And I think this might be the week where they break through and pull that upset. They have been on the cusp of it. Show has been a stud at quarterback all year. I mean, the guy's a gamer. He racks up a ton of yards, 20 touchdowns. I mean, they can hang with any team, and that's dangerous. And I don't know if Clemson has had to deal with a offense as talented as Louisville in a while. So, as crazy as it sounds, and this is just, I'm going upset of the week. I know we're not calling out specific upsets, but I think they're going to win. I don't think Clemson has faced a team of this quality since Georgia. And I know obviously Louisville's not on Georgia's level, but they have not been pushed and faced a top tier opponent. Think back to Clemson versus NC State. That was supposed to be a big in-state matchup versus ranked teams. NC State turned out to be a dud. Florida State, horrendous team. They only beat them by 16. I think this record's a little deceiving, and that's why I have Louisville pulling the upset.
Hey, listen, man. I love it. I love the pick. We both agreed that we would be taking Penn State in the first game, so I absolutely love, I love when we go opposite here. So no, I'm loving the pick from you there. And to close out, this recording here, last game we're going to talk about here is going to be Duke taking on Miami. So I'll throw it to you for this one. I think this one's probably going to be a pretty quick talk about for both of us, but get your thoughts on this game.
Yeah, so obviously Miami heavy favorite. Cam Ward just been balling out. They seem to be really clicking right now. Obviously, they just took it to their in-state rival. I mean, unrelated, but Florida State, that's a dead program. I know people wanted to write off Clemson. That is one of the most dead programs you could possibly imagine. Mike Norvell, what a mess.
Which is wild because I came into this year thinking Mike Norvell was one of the better coaches in college football. So shame on me for that. But
yeah, and I think the interesting thing here, though, with this matchup is I think it's actually crazy that Miami's 20.5-point favorites against Duke. Duke is not a bad team. They're maybe not top tier, top talent, but they have some good players. And if Miami has shown us anything, it is a deficiency outside of Cam Ward to play against other top level teams. And it's been Superman Cam Ward, whether it be against Cal or Virginia Tech or whoever. He has been the difference maker for them this year. If they didn't have Cam Ward, I don't know. What do you think Miami's record would be today? They're 8-0 right now. Maybe they'd be 5-3.
Yeah, 5-3 probably. Honestly,
Yeah. So it says a lot about Cam Ward, and kudos to him. But same kind of thing with that I kind of mentioned with Clemson just now is maybe, well, Miami's played better teams, but they've had a lot of close games, and any game for them, I could see them losing, which is crazy for a top 5 team.
Yep.
If Cam Ward ever has an off day, and maybe he won't. I mean, he's given us no reason to think he will. But if something goes wrong at all, there's a sliver of hope for any opponent against this Miami team. And I think Malik Murphy, he's played in big games, he's been in big programs. This is not new territory for him. Coming from Texas, I know he only played in spot duty, but he's been on that stage. He's been in big moments, and I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if Duke's the team to do it, but it just feels like Miami's a ticking time bomb, and sooner than later, that time's gonna run out.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's in a few weeks, when Miami actually has to play some tougher opponents, but or if they have ACC championship against Clemson or whatever that looks like. But it just seems like it can happen, and I'm not going to pick Duke, but I'm going to say keep another close eye on them, because this could be another Virginia Tech game where they're written off and it ends up being a game that goes down to the wire.
all I'm going to say, go Blue Devils. Like, straight up, that's my pick. I'll tell you why here in a second. They're my pick. They are. You touched on it a lot. Miami is and has been a ticking time bomb this whole year. And granted, give all the credit in the world to Cam Ward, Mario Cristobal, and what this program has done. They're sitting there at 8-0. And if they suffer a loss here, they're by no means out of the ACC championship game or out of playoff contention or potential national championship contention. Like, this is not like Miami doesn't deserve to be one of the top 5 teams in the country. No, they absolutely do. They're sitting there at 8-0. Cam Ward's had a phenomenal year, but they have been skating by in several different games. Like what Ohio State did this past week against Nebraska, or what Georgia did against Kentucky, or, what Texas just had against Vanderbilt. Those were one-offs or maybe two-offs for some of those teams, in college football, where it's like, they didn't look their best this week. Miami's had that like about three, maybe 4 times this year where you're like, this team they're winning, but do they look impressive in their winning? And I don't think that they always do. And look, to me, it comes down to you hit the nail on the head. Malik Murphy was recruited and went to Texas. Like, this is a big time recruit. He's got a lot of skill, a lot of talent, and he's at Duke now, and he's having a pretty solid year. He's got just shy of 20 touchdowns. He's got 5 picks, but Cam Ward's got just a little over 20 touchdowns here, and he also has 5 picks. So both of them have had some slight turnover issues this year. So to me, it's going to boil down to which one of them makes that mistake throw or two that turns into a pick, that turns into a game-changing, momentum swinging opportunity for the opposing team. And to me, Miami's been on the right side of the coin 3 or 4 times this year already. And I think it changes this week. I fully agree with you when you said that, you're shocked that the spread in this game was 21. Like, that's wild to me. I know Miami's 8-0. I know they're the number 5 team in the country. I've got nothing but love for Cam Ward. I think he's a phenomenal player, and I think he's going to do great at the next level. But like Miami, this isn't the 2021 Georgia team, 2020 Alabama team. Like, they have had opportunities to lose several games so far this year. They haven't, so give them credit in that. But it's not like they've been blowing every single team out and have just been looking like a dominant force in college football. Like, that's not been the case. And I think it changes this week. I think Miami comes out of this week 8-1, and I think Duke's sitting there 7-2, coming out victorious, not even just covering the spread. I'm picking Duke outright in this game. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I love it. I think it can happen. I felt like I was going to be too bold in going with both Louisville and Duke.
That's fair.
You know what? You have me believing, though. I actually just placed a little parlay with our 2 upsets there. So
there we go. I I love it. And look, like each one of us picked the underdog in 2 out of these 3 games. We both took Penn State, who's the underdog to Ohio State right now. You took Louisville. I took Clemson. I took Duke. You took you took Miami in this recording at least. And look, I mean, we feel that the underdogs may come out in advantageous positions, in these biggest games of this upcoming college football week. So we'll see if we're right here, but hopefully we're in store for some great games. And guys, if you made it through the video, if you listened through, always appreciate you guys. Like, subscribe, comment down below. Let us know your thoughts on these games and just your thoughts on the general college football landscape. And we'll see you on the next one.